Hello.
What's up,
I
Lauren?
had to break the silence.
Great
How's it
to see
going?
you.
Lauren, where were you, Lauren, during the halving? Like when that block hit, what were you
Can you
doing?
believe it?
I was just about to ask that
Can you
question.
believe? Right, I got to back this up because I usually catch a lot of shit from Lauren and from Mummy because she has to listen to Lauren's moaning, and she usually says, "You never give me enough like information
I haven't
about
said that in a long time.
who we're gonna talk to, and you only give me like 10 minutes heads up and blah blah blah." So tonight she had 2.5 hours. I'm like, it's gonna be Jesse and Croesus. What did you say?
Them again?
Gonna be Andy too, also.
Oh, excuse me, Andy increases, exactly. Andy increases. And she said, "What? Those guys again?" I'm like,
Again?
"Yeah." So you're prepped, you know these guys. And she's like, "Well, I don't know what to ask them. I've asked them everything." And I said, "Ask them how their halving was." And she said, "No, that's a bad question." And now he's beat you to it. Now he's beat you
I
to
think
it.
it's a
So
great
you're back on
question.
the hot spot.
We were in Poland, but we slept through the halving because we were too tired. So
Oh yeah. It would have been middle of the night for you guys there, huh?
It dropped just after 3 a.m. if I remember rightly.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I think the day before we just arrived in the morning at 1 a.m. So
Yeah.
Lauren, did you feel like it was a big letdown? I mean, Dad's been talking it up a lot, probably the last year or so, and then it happens and nothing is different. Was it a big letdown?
uh, no. To be honest,
Neutral, very
if my
diplomatic.
if my dad didn't even mention it, I wouldn't even known.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, imagine what will you be doing at the next halving? Who knows?
wait, it's
It'll be
in 4 years.
2028. Yeah.
So I will be 17. Yeah.
Well, come on and
You'll be
ask these
back.
guys what they
You'll
were
be
doing.
Oh yeah. What were you doing at the halving? Oh, what were
all
you?
Andy,
right.
what were you doing?
I'll go. I'll go. Okay, so I have. I wouldn't call it a tradition exactly, but me and my buddy Damien Somerset, great Bitcoiner, um, sometimes go out and have beers. And there was a time during the last bear market where we just decided to post it on Twitter with, and it would be like 10 hours notice or less. It'd be like tonight, we're going to this place and we're gonna have beers, and we called it Bad OPSEC, and so it became a little bit of a tradition. So I called a Bad OPSEC version having edition, and it was Friday, and it could have been perfect timing because it looked like the halving was going to happen around 6 or 7 p.m. Pacific time. And so I called like start at 6 or something. But then the blocks came fast, and so of course the halving happened a couple hours earlier. So we missed it slightly, but people
Oh,
showed up. We had a good turnout. We had a good time. Father's office in Culver City, my favorite hangout joint. We'll
I've been
also
there.
Yeah. We'll also be there after the BitDevs LA event this Saturday. So trying to kind of make it into a local Bitcoin institution of sorts. And so that's what I did for the halving, and it was a great time.
Nice.
I was on a plane, and I got the Wi-Fi. Spent the $25 on the Wi-Fi just so I could watch what's on Daniel Prince's shirt there. Mempool.space tick by, and then the yellow block showed up, and here it came, and I celebrated by, you know, woo, just silently in my seat as the halving happened, and I could, I was also making sure that anybody behind me could see my screen, just in case there were any Bitcoiners back there. But of course, nobody came up after to say, "Oh, you're watching Mempool," because we were that early. But I was on my way to Boston to give a presentation the next day, um, on the halving at the MIT Bitcoin Expo. They I got invited to be on the custody panel that they were having, and when they put out their like tentative schedule, I realized there was nothing about the halving, even though this was going to be the day after the halving. So I suggested that, I offered to do a presentation on the halving, its mechanics and impact, if the organizers were interested, and they took me up on it. So I was actually during the halving preparing slides about the halving to give a presentation the next day, which was pretty fitting, I guess.
So let me get this
Love
right.
to see it.
MIT were throwing this event right on the halving, but weren't going to
Yep.
talk about the halving. Oh my God.
Correct.
Oh.
And to be fair, they sent out the like tentative schedule about a month beforehand, and so they probably weren't like super aware that the halving was going to land right then. But Clark Moody's dashboard was predicting it was going to be
Right, yeah, but
right then.
but they're super aware that the halving's going to happen, right? Or are they that
Yeah,
far behind the
it
game?
should be. I think the reality is if you're a student at MIT, you're running this MIT Bitcoin club, but you're not living 100% of your time steeped in the Bitcoin world. You're taking classes and you're fitting Bitcoin in on the side. So maybe they weren't super aware.
We're so early.
I'm glad that you made it onto the docket. It was well deserved. It's good to see them upgrading the speaker talent. I'm guessing Gary Gensler was on the docket in previous iterations, right? Chances are good. So now we got real Bitcoiners. I'm glad to hear it, Jesse.
Yeah, as it happened, the current patriarch of the Nobel family, the Nobel Prize family, spoke right before me, and I think my presentation was a little better. So, for the morning, I won the prize instead of Mr. Nobel himself.
I'm pretty
if only
sure
you'd won it, you would have been in the august company of such central bankers as Ben Bernanke.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes it a little. I don't know if I want to be in that company after all.
Yeah,
Have you
you're
gone
better off.
down the David Nobel rabbit hole?
It only I'm not sure what rabbit hole that is. Only as far as the like I guess rather well known history of that family inventing dynamite and then sort of creating the Nobel Prize as a bit of a penance for all of the destruction they created in the world.
Yeah, like you invent dynamite and then invent the Peace Prize.
How did that make sense?
And that's just the very like surface level. Yeah. Anyway, but Jesse is on that.
Well, there's
That's the rabbit hole I was thinking of. Yes.
There's a long tradition of inventing weapons and making grand statements like they will end war. There can never be war again because we've invented this great new powerful weapon and no one will dare to use it on anybody else.
Yep. Well, including Bitcoin, Andy.
Including Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's true. That's funny.
Yeah, Bitcoin is not a weapon. I reject that hypothesis, sir. Unambiguously 100%.
Did you read that book?
No.
No, did I?
Yeah, I never did.
No. I could not bring myself to read it. No.
Yeah.
We're not even going to shill it.
He blocked me early on when I pushed back on the framing of Bitcoin as a weapon. And so from that point on, maybe it was petty on my part, but it's sort of disingenuous if you're going to trot that out and somebody's in good faith going to push back and you resort to blocking.
Yeah, he did it to loads
Agreed.
of people. It was random. It was weird. The whole thing was weird from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Well, Lauren,
Yeah,
back to the halving. You celebrated it the right way, or at least you're ahead of the crowd, ahead of the trend. Someday it will be a complete non-event. No one will care. It'll just be in the background. It'll be no big deal. People will sleep through it. So you've got the right idea. You're looking into the future of Bitcoin.
I am the future of Bitcoin.
That's
Whoa, yes. That's awesome.
it. In more ways than one.
Yes, you're going to have to take over from the likes of us old codgers in like 20, 30 years when people aren't going to take us anywhere near as seriously as they take us right now, right, guys?
Yeah. In several ways, right? Like we'll get old, but you also just get tired of trotting out the same old FUD busting routine to try to like raise awareness for this thing. And yeah, I'm sure you guys all feel this way too, of like the 100th time you explain how the halving is not going to cause a mining death spiral, your heart's in it a little bit less, and you wonder how many more times you can do it before you just stop responding.
Well, did you see the tweet that there was a Swiss newspaper that was reporting on the Bitcoin halving as the day that the price of Bitcoin halves?
That's it. the popular press. It makes you wonder, like, was that written by? It couldn't have been written by an algorithm, because the algorithm would have probably got it right as
Yeah.
opposed to wrong.
That's a great point.
There's no limit to lack of knowledge in the journalism space as it relates to Bitcoin. I like to say that it's gone from god awful to only bad. There has been some improvement over the years that I've been watching. I don't know if you guys would agree, but yeah, it's modest improvements here and there. Everything improves with time in Bitcoin, or almost everything.
We just earlier today we recorded the On Ramp podcast, The Last Trade, with Bitwise's co-founder Hong, and he had a really interesting take on this about how the ETFs present a kind of phase change for Bitcoin as an asset. And it was a good visual metaphor for that, of, it's like it's now a different asset than it was before, specifically because we went from a world where it was just private market capital that would ever access Bitcoin to now public market capital can access Bitcoin. And part of that too is how Wall Street now is going to talk about Bitcoin as a positive, as something that should be included in every portfolio, and that'll eventually seep into the societal norms about how Bitcoin fits into your portfolio. And it's just interesting that like we're living through that right now, to Andy's point. Yeah.
Yep.
100%.
All your dad's former colleagues, who used to work in the belly of the beast in the city of London in the financial arena. Maybe some of them are still there. Their bosses basically are finally coming around, is what we're trying to say.
100%.
No doubt your dad already orange pilled them, already educated them, clued them into what was going on. But I'm talking about his former colleagues, of course.
Yeah, but unfortunately, your dad was the first touch point that these people had, and everybody needs 3 touch points, right? But the first touch point is always processed as like, well, that's crazy. That's too far out there. It's the problem with being too early.
Absolutely.
Yep. I think Lawrence figured this out, though. Lawrence figured out how to at least look like a normie. And I mean that in the best possible way. Not look like a lunatic like the rest of us is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, exactly.
A younger, better looking, more articulate normie.
Yeah, Lauren, question for you related to that. Do you feel like you have to, when you're hanging out with other kids, not talk about Bitcoin or hide that part of what you know about?
I bring it up, but with a friend of mine that I see a lot, she knows I talk about Bitcoin. She knows I'm homeschooled, so she's like, so when she says something bad about her school, I'm like, well, and she knows what I'm gonna start about, and she's like, yeah, but it's fine. I'm like, okay. And then I start talking about something related to Bitcoin. She's like, yeah. Anyways, so I was like, okay.
Yeah. All right, so you let it fly. That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't be bothered. She and plus she's like 12, so I mean you can learn at that age, but it's a bit different when you go to school and have parents think a different way. So
well said.
Well, thank you, Lauren, for your questions as always.
I have another one.
Oh, go on then. I'm sorry. I thought you were getting bored with us three.
No.
No? All right, sure. You're
Um,
good to hang.
Can you guys explain the halving?
Jesse, you can take this. Since you just just explained it to the August attendees of the the MIT conference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Can I explain the halving? Well, so obviously you know what the halving is, right? It's when the new block subsidy, so the new Bitcoin created per block, gets cut in half. And so, when Bitcoin first started, it was 50 Bitcoin per block. It was introduced to the supply every 10 minutes. Then after one halving, 25, then 12 and a half, 6.25. And then a couple of weeks ago, we just dropped to 3.125 new Bitcoin issued per block. And that's the boring part about it, because it's simple and it's straightforward and it doesn't seem like much. But the exciting part about it is the mechanics of how that changes supply and demand, and specifically the price equilibrium where supply meets demand, and the market psychology that flows from that. Because going into a halving, more or less, all else equal, ignoring a lot of noise in the market, for the year or so before a halving, in my opinion, Bitcoin's price finds supply demand price equilibrium, meaning there's as much demand coming into the Bitcoin market as there is new Bitcoin being created. And then so that you find the price level where those two meet, and then that's where the price kind of gets stable for the year or so before a halving. And then boom, the halving happens, and now there's half as much new supply being created, but just as much demand flowing into Bitcoin. And so there's a shortage every day, every week, every month. And that shortage accumulates over time. What it causes is that the Bitcoin that was being created, that's no longer being created, well, the demand that's coming into the market has to find that supply somewhere. And the only place they can find that is existing holders. So they have to chip away, they have to buy supply from existing holders until there's no longer any willing sellers. And when there's no willing sellers, there's still this demand coming in. They have to raise their bids. They have to bid more to find supply of Bitcoin. And that causes the slow drifting up of the price in the 6 to 12 months post halving. And that sets in motion too much enthusiasm in the market. More capital piles in, people are less willing to sell, and it's a flywheel of actually a bubble, a little mini bubble sets in motion, and people get overextended, too enthusiastic, turns into mania. And that's what we've seen in the 12 to 18 months post halving for the last 15 years, is a bubble forms. And then of course that bubble pops on the back end of that, a year after the halving. But the mechanics of the halving are not undone. And so you still have less supply being created. And so when that bubble pops, it stabilizes at a price that was higher than the prior stable level before the halving. And so it's a stepwise series of bubbles that we've been living through, going up and to the right on the price graph. So that's the halving in short in my book. It's simple supply mechanics that cause a second and third order series of effects that result in the price bubbles that we've seen in Bitcoin over the last 15 years, and I expect will continue to happen every 4 years because of the halvings going forward.
Compounding S-curves, Croesus?
Exactly.
So,
Go ahead.
hold on. If I understand
Yeah, Lauren's really
correctly,
thinking about this. All right, what do you got, Lauren?
If I understand correctly, is it like the block just takes longer to be made properly, or it's just taking slower? Oh wait, that's the
All
Um,
right,
same thing.
I'll take it.
Yeah, there you go, Andy.
So there's a couple things in there, Lauren, and one is the number of Bitcoins issued per block. That's just a formula. It's in the code. It's been there since day one. It's never changed. And some people seem to doubt whether it will never change, but it hasn't and it won't. The timing of the blocks, that's a little bit of a different thing. One of the major innovations of Bitcoin is this thing called the now I'm going to blank on the name, what it's called, the adjustment.
Difficulty adjustment.
Difficulty adjustment. Thank you. The difficulty adjustment. And so the problem with mining, the problem with proof of work is that the world gets better and better at proof of work, at doing computation. And that's because the computers get better. In the early days, you could mine Bitcoin on your laptop computer. Then people started using graphics processing units and things, FPGAs, called, that's field programmable gate arrays. It's just a type of chip that is partly adjustable and partly not. And then we got into ASICs, which are just built to mine Bitcoin. And ASICs today can mine, can produce as many hashes. They can produce, I don't know, probably 1 billion times as many hashes per second, if I had to guess, as in the early days. Maybe it's 1 trillion times. It's multiples. But the difficulty adjustment is this brilliant setup that Satoshi hatched, which is, it makes it harder in terms of hash power over time to earn a block, and it targets a 10-minute block. So it adjusts and it moves over time, and sometimes the difficulty goes down, but mostly it goes up. And yeah, the difficulty adjustment allows more and more hash power and greater security to come to the Bitcoin network over time without the blocks getting produced faster and faster and faster and faster. So the blocks would get produced faster and faster and faster under previously proposed designs for things that tried to be Bitcoin earlier but failed. And Bitcoin, with the difficulty adjustment, solved this problem.
Okay, so I think I understand it better now. Is it basically if people get better computers that can mine Bitcoin way faster, the difficulty adjustment is there to kind of slow it down and stop it?
Yeah,
That's it.
perfect.
Okay.
It's to
And
exactly balance it.
The intention there is to make it so that a certain number of blocks are found every 2 weeks, and then the Bitcoin network assesses how close how on track were we for 2 weeks over that set number of blocks, and then it makes it harder or easier to find blocks for the next 2 weeks in the hopes of making that set number of blocks line up with 2 weeks again
On an average of 10
so
minutes.
it's like
so a little fun fact, it's 2016 blocks. It's every 2016 blocks, which is around 2 weeks. And if you reverse the numbers 2016, what do we get, Jesse?
oh wow, I never thought of that. 6102. That's good.
Now, do you think he did that on purpose?
That's so possible. Oh
Do
my
you want to
gosh.
explain to Lauren?
I was gonna say you might want to explain because I'm
the pennies
lost.
are dropping in Jesse's mind right now. Andy, were you already up to speed on that one? Or
Sure, yeah. So 6102, Executive Order 6102, which is 2016 backward, which I hadn't thought of before. Genius. Was this action taken by the Roosevelt administration in, I can't remember if it was it was early 1930s. Was it
33, I think.
Yeah.
5th of April, 1933.
There we go. And the administration decided that it would henceforth be illegal for U.S. citizens to hold gold as an investment or as a store of value. And so people call it a confiscation, but basically, some people had gold in their houses, and if they chose to hang onto it despite the prohibition by the government, they did, but they faced significant penalties. I don't recall if it was just fines or if it was also punishable with prison.
Up to 10 years.
Maybe, yeah. Was it 10 years? Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty harsh penalty. Can you imagine? You keep a yellow rock in your house, and the government can technically take it and throw you in prison for 10 years of your life. Crazy. But in any case, it did happen. It was the period in United States history when it was illegal to own gold. And of course, Bitcoiners think about it a lot because Bitcoin is a better version of gold. It's a substitute for gold. They're different, and gold has its positive characteristics. In my view, in my analysis, though, Bitcoin overall is an even better hard money than gold, and it's a substitute for gold, and it's taking market share from gold, right? At the margin, people are thinking about, where am I going to put my dollars? Where am I going to store my wealth? In a world that Bitcoin didn't exist, a lot more of them would be buying gold. By the way, they are still buying gold, but some of them are now buying Bitcoin, and that's the way it's going. But Bitcoiners think very hard about avoiding an executive order 6102 that would prohibit holding Bitcoin. And yeah, I think it's one of the most important factors as an American. One of my most important priorities is to continue to keep America safe for Bitcoin, keep all jurisdictions, all countries safe for Bitcoin, safe for people to hold Bitcoin, because I think it's a fundamental human right. And that's all I have on 6102.
And another fun fact, 5th of April was Satoshi hinted at that being his birthday. So you got 5th of April, 1933, you have 6102 reversed to 2016. And you're like, oh man, what, really? Like, because then you have the 3rd of January, you know, bank chancellor on second brink for second bailout for banks, that little nugget in there.
And October 31st.
Right, Halloween.
Which was also the date Martin Luther posted the 95 Theses on the church door.
Correct, that as well. You can find all these facts. I'm going to have to shill her book. Kisa wrote a great book, The Simplest Bitcoin Book, and she's got all of the number stuff in there. It's fascinating. She got all of the palindromes as well, and it's really great.
And in context of all that, Satoshi probably deliberately chose 2016 blocks as a 6102 backwards.
I believe so, because like it's exactly what he's trying to do, right? He's trying to reverse that. You know, take self-custody of your Bitcoin, and you have pure private property.
And that's part. If there's anything to add to Andy's excellent summary of 6102 and how it relates to Bitcoin, is Satoshi and all of the early cypherpunks were motivated by trying to find a digital money that wouldn't have gold's Achilles heel, which was this 6102 capability, the fact that the government can confiscate it because it's physical, you can only store it in vaults, and therefore it ends up in banks, and that's easy to confiscate. But a digital money, a digital gold that you can keep as 12 words in your head becomes unstoppable, impossible to confiscate, effectively at least. And so that was, I think, one of the main design goals of Bitcoin from the get-go, was how do we make this an unconfiscatable digital gold?
You mean it wasn't for the mad gains?
that comes as a result of success on that tenet, you know.
It wasn't for the Lambos and the Rolexes.
I came for the gains. That's what got my attention. That's the story. It's the top of funnel for most people. They look at number go up, they see the price going up, gets them interested. Maybe they buy a little, then they start to learn about what they just bought, and down the rabbit hole they go.
They come for number go up and stay for number go down, Andy.
I was gonna say, I think that's literally nearly everyone's Bitcoin story. Get in it for the gains.
Yeah. but like it's number go down
Yep.
technology, as we've just been talking about. That's the halving. Like, you know, there is only one set amount of Bitcoin. It goes down.
That's it. Scarcity, digital scarcity, a first in humanity.
Yeah.
Lauren, we've got
Once in a
philosophical here. We were going to
species.
do
Once in a
do
species,
macro
some
show.
might say. Jesse might say.
That's right. Yeah, Lauren, Lauren, do you know what happened when, you know, some of the great painters like Picasso or Monet or Van Gogh or, you know, whoever your favorite is, when they died, do you know what happened to the price of each of their paintings?
Went up, right?
It went up a lot. And
Why? Why did it go up?
why becomes the question.
Because
And you could come up with any explanation, but yeah, any guesses?
my guess is because the person who died can't make any more.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah, like if you were gonna invest in a Van Gogh painting, but Van Gogh was still around, you don't know how many more he's gonna paint. And so you may not be prepared to pay a lot of money for something that he could turn around and make 100 of them next year. But if he's gonna make 0 more, suddenly you can rely on storing value in that more. So that's the only example that I know of in the traditional asset landscape of increasing scarcity, meaning a reduction of supply creation. And Bitcoin is using that same mechanic, but over a slow period, each halving.
I'm gonna add to that. The other thing I think that makes art valuable once these painters are dead is often they have colorful stories, right? Talk about Van Gogh, you know, cutting off appendages. How they die is usually interesting. Often they die young, they die early, and that's a story in itself, which also adds to the legend and the allure. And there again, Satoshi took full advantage with respect to how he, she, or they created Bitcoin and let it into the world, right? They created it and yet managed to maintain anonymity. Think about how hard it is to create something as impactful as Bitcoin and yet not have some enterprising, energetic investigator or a world of them or governments, you know, individuals or governments not being able to figure out who this person is. And that's a pretty amazing story. One of the more amazing stories that I can think of. And that also adds, I think, to the allure and the appeal of Bitcoin.
Agreed.
Are you done with your questions now?
Do you just want to get rid of me?
No, you know, we were going to do a macro show, but we've gone. I mean, I'm down for it. I'm fine.
I was just gonna ask what's a macro show.
What's a macro show?
We're going to talk about financial markets. We're going to give our latest and greatest stories about what's going on and why the price of Bitcoin is doing whatever it's doing. And we might be right. We might be wrong. We try to be a little bit more right than wrong. And yeah, but people are very interested in it because even though most Bitcoiners claim to have a long-term plan and a long-term view on Bitcoin, they're also keenly aware of where the price went last week, yesterday, a minute ago, 10 seconds ago. And yeah, it occupies a lot of their headspace, a lot of their mind. And by the way, we think that things that go on in financial markets have quite a bit to do with where the price of Bitcoin goes, at least in the shorter and medium term, and arguably in the long term too. So everyone wants to know about number go up, right? Well, when is the number going to go up? How much is the number going to go up? Why is it going down? How come number goes down sometimes? Will it keep going down? How long will it keep going down? When's it going to go back up? Yeah, so we can talk about that.
We're going to talk about the outflows on the ETFs.
Oh,
if you want to hang around for that. All right. Well,
There you go.
Do you want to say goodnight then?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I
See
think-
you
Great to see you,
soon.
Lauren.
I think your
See you next
longest
time,
ever
Lauren.
appearance.
Always a
Woo.
pleasure.
Oh, it might have been it's a bit longer. Sure. Have to look back. Have to look back at the 300 something episodes. Anyways.
Well, this is progress. We've been talking for a while, Lauren. So I think you've actually just about taken up the torch from your dad. You know, call it half the conversation. You're running it. So next time we talk, you'll be doing the majority. He'll be making a cameo at the beginning, and it'll be your show.
Yeah, it turns out I'm just to be sat on. I'm a booster seat.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you. Oh.
Good night.
Bye.
You're not even a very good one either. You're too slim.
Yeah,
Probably
I
a
can't.
bony booster seat.
I can't imagine I have the most comfortable legs to sit on. Right then, yeah, lads. So I sent you the link just before we started because I was looking around for macro news, and here it was, hot off the press. BlackRock reports first outflows as Bitcoin ETFs shrink 20% since March. Was this on your radars yet? What were you watching?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, it couldn't. So there was a lot of noise coming out of very enthusiastic people about how the inflows are huge and there's momentum and it's just going to keep going. And I mean, it couldn't. This is like anything else in Bitcoin. Some trend emerges. You can't believe at the strength of the trend. It accelerates. It's ongoing. It lasts for a significant amount of time. And then people just extrapolate forever. And of course, you can't extrapolate forever unless and until we get that Bitcoin rapture, hyper Bitcoinization, right? Number just goes straight vertical, which I don't expect anytime soon. I'm not in the Samson Mo $1 million Bitcoin in this cycle. Although he did make a decent argument when we interviewed him about it.
Yeah. I don't think we'll ever get the Bitcoin rapture moment. I think it'll always be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of, or maybe 5 steps forward, 1 step back.
So anyway,
but yeah,
just it couldn't go up only. You couldn't have inflows forever. I don't think inflows forever have ever happened with any investment product or any ETF product. And so yeah, it's normal course. We're in this middle time. I'm kind of coming around to the Michael Howell liquidity flows are everything.
Oh really?
Yeah. I just
Okay,
I think
flesh that thesis out before you put your thoughts to it so people know exactly what that is.
Yeah, so Michael Howell, his firm is Cross Border Capital, and they're I think mostly in the business of just watching global liquidity flows. Like, where is the money flowing in terms of, in and out of various asset classes and jurisdictions? And as well, is the total going up or down? Which, of course, has a lot to do with what's the Fed doing, what are the major central banks doing, as well as what are private capital flows doing. And I don't know how predictive it is. I think it's more of a coincident indicator, but it makes a lot of sense that the amount of liquidity, the amount of money, and we can argue about how you define money in the system and how it's flowing, should have quite a bit to do with asset prices in general, and especially Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is or has historically been a sponge for liquidity, it seems. So I used to be more skeptical of the capital flow driving price. I am still skeptical of it in the long run, but I think in the short term, when you look at price volatility and kind of what's going on month to month, my suspicion is that it plays a major role.
Yeah.
Jesse?
Tell me I'm wrong. I could be.
No, maybe you're right. So I guess there's sort of a bit of a schism in terms of what Bitcoiners think is the main driver of Bitcoin's monetization. And there's there's the halving camp, and I'm very firmly in it. And of course, that has different iterations of or sub tribes, I guess, of like stock to flow model or whatever. And I refuse to sit in the stock to flow model camp, but I'm very firmly in the halving drives everything camp. And then there's the people who have been very vocal the last couple years, who are anti stock to flow model, and in place of the stock to flow model and the halving in general, they put forward liquidity. And it's very compelling because, and it may be right, it may be the primary driver. I think ultimately you're kind of measuring M2 money supply with that kind of lens, and M2 money supply goes up and to the right, except for the last 18 months. But in the last month, it has switched to being positive year over year again. So it goes up and to the right. We're always creating more money, and the ebbs and flows of that are liquidity. I think that's a fair characterization. And that, I think, amplifies whatever short-term moves have been happening with Bitcoin. So I think that drives a lot of the like maybe 3 to 6 month kind of time frame price action with Bitcoin. But to me, the prime mover is the halving, because increasing scarcity, that 4-year cycle, increasing scarcity is what causes this to be an attractive savings technology, such that people would want to buy some to hold now in order to speculate that future halvings will cause the Bitcoin that they store away today to be worth much more in purchasing power in the future. And I think that's first and foremost why we adopt Bitcoin as a store of value. So to me,
I don't think we're disagreeing, by
the way.
Yeah.
That's right. I think
they're both.
I think the halving is that 4-year mega cycle, and then that short-term time frame, 3, 6, 9 months, is largely driven by ebbs and flows of global liquidity, with Bitcoin being the number one sponge, or at least the least manipulated sponge out there. But I think that there are some people in that anti-stock to flow model camp who are 100% liquidity drives everything, the halving doesn't matter, and I think they are wrong. But I think you can have both, basically.
Does liquidity
on that we agree.
Does liquidity chase liquidity? Does that make sense to you when I say that? Do you know what I'm trying to get at? Like the liquidity, i.e. the new money that's coming into the system, is that chasing after the most liquid assets in the market, i.e. Apple stock's far more liquid than XYZ. Would that make sense? If you're getting your hands on that new money first, you're going to be drawn to something that's like the most liquid in the market to be able to spin out of it as soon as you want to capitalize.
Yeah, I see your point. It's almost like it's related to like the Cantillon effect, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're the closest to the liquidity because you're an asset that can be most easily deployed into and is most quickly affected by an increase in liquidity, then that begets that liquidity plowing into that and causing a sort of self-fulfilling effect there. That's
in
probably,
which case,
is probably
in which case, and this is where I'm going. This is where my mind is going with it. In which case, then Bitcoin is the most liquid asset on the market, just by the fact that it's open 24/7. Yeah. Stocks are going to close for at least 2 days a week, sometimes 3, depending on which week of the month you're in. Real estate is illiquid, as we know. You just can't just flip a commercial real estate building or a house or mansion or whatever else.
People,
just you guys thinking
point to. Yeah, people often point to like U.S. Treasury market as like the most liquid market on the planet, but you're right. Like it doesn't trade 24/7, and so it sort of has this handicap to being a truly liquid, like 24/7 asset.
Did Bitcoin redefine liquidity? Because before we just thought about like the most the asset traded in the most amount of dollars per trading session is the most liquid asset that day or that week or whatever. And now it's like, no, guys, it's time.
Yeah, it's a step change digitization of liquidity, of global market liquidity. I mean, you know, of course we needed to be in a world where there's a 24/7 global market, you know, and living in a world where there's not, that's analog. That's the best you can do in an analog world, where you have to have people manning the stations in order to make a market work. But you know, in a digitized, automated world, you don't need that. And so here's Bitcoin making that possible. I think you're right that it is March 12th, 2020 is all you really need to look at, because that was the COVID crash for Bitcoin, where we dropped 50% overnight, and the stock market crashed like a week later or 3 days later, something like that. Bitcoin crashed first because it was the most liquid asset, the easiest thing to sell, and so that happened faster.
Yeah. So and then the paradox, or the thing that'll really make us scratch our heads, is that a story of liquidity flows in the market now, or is that a story of adoption? In other words, you know, of course, if you said, anyone who said, oh, it's only liquidity flows that drive Bitcoin's price, that's obviously wrong, because as you pointed out, Jesse, if M2, I don't know, I'll make up a number, went up 10x since Bitcoin Pizza Day, right? Then Bitcoin's price should have only gone up 10x or whatever. And of course, it hasn't only gone up 10x since then. It's gone up, I don't know, millions, or at least a million x. And so yeah, it's like many things in money or financial markets or Bitcoin. It's more than one factor, and we get into trouble trying to extract or isolate one variable. That's what we're taught to do as scientists. Employ the scientific method, isolate one variable. The reality is you just can't do that. And so it's a combination. It's a combination of, yes, it's a liquidity sponge. Also, it's adoption of a brand new technology, which by definition is the most liquid in the world, or will be the most liquid in the world if it reaches its potential. It is interesting to ask, has it already become the quote unquote most liquid asset? Certainly the fact that it trades 168 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week makes it more liquid for sure. Yeah.
This is a bit of a tangent, if you'll allow me, guys.
Please.
On the money M2 going up and to the right, like 10x or whatever. The other thing that bothers me about the objections to stock to flow as a concept, really, and also the halving as a driver of price appreciation, is that the statisticians always point to, you can't have something correlated with time increasing for it to be statistically valid as a driver of you know, the dependent variable. And my pushback on that is, well, that's how Bitcoin is fucking designed. It's designed to have increasing scarcity attached to time progressing. And so, oops, you correlated with time there, but that doesn't mean that, you know, you're not having a real effect as time progresses. Anyway, so a bit of a tangent, but that's the other thing that bothers me about the pure liquidity drives everything camp, is you're ignoring the fact that, yeah, you have this statistically anomalous effect, because traditionally you're not supposed to allow for things that correlate with time, but deal with it.
Yeah,
that's what's happening.
If the NASDAQ was to start trading on a Saturday, well, people aren't going to trade on the NASDAQ. They're just going to, no, I've never done it before, I'm not going to start doing it right now. Or are they going to trade for that 6th day of the week?
They're definitely going to trade.
Of course,
if you give people the opportunity to trade, they will trade. Or the algorithms will trade. They'll create machines to trade.
Yeah, that's right. And that's digitization. And, you know, Bitcoin's just ahead of the curve there.
Yep. This is why I mostly, you know, when it comes to like, does scarcity matter? Yes. Does the halving matter? Yes, agree with everything you've said, Jesse. But when it comes to Bitcoin's potential valuation, then we start to think in terms of what are the asset classes that it's going to take market share from, and in what percentage, and also over what time period. And that's an inexact science.
And in what order
something-
as well, right, Andy? What comes
Sure.
first? Gold,
That's
real
right.
estate, fine art, collectibles.
Yeah.
Throw the bones up in the air and see what lands and try and read them. And it's a crystal ball.
Yeah. And I think the answer is bonds.
Okay.
I think that's
You know what I like to think in terms of? I don't remember who said this first, but it was something along the lines of Bitcoin is the new gold, and gold is the new bonds. In the sense that,
Huh.
if you think about dynamic demand shifts or asset flows, I think about my clients. I think it's easier for them to get their head around the fact that their bonds ain't such a great play anymore. But gold, since it's been around for a long time, may be trustworthy. Also, since it's underpinned currencies in the past. So yes, it makes sense to sell some bonds and allocate toward gold. Oh, but wait a minute, Bitcoin is better gold. So I could argue that there's this sort of daisy chain of value leak.
I love
Bonds leaks
that.
into gold, and then gold leaks into Bitcoin.
Andy, I think you're saying
yeah.
every bond's a junk bond. And Croesus, actually.
Yeah, credit risk does exist. Credit risk is a thing. And when it comes to sovereign debt, when it comes to treasury debt, U.S. government debt, I don't worry much about outright default, but certainly I worry about printing of money to make the real value of those dollars in the future that are going to come as cash flows in terms of interest and principal. I do worry about that part being debased, and I certainly would rather, at the margin, have my savings in Bitcoin. But also, I'd rather probably have it in gold than bonds, or at least that's the way my head has been going. My analysis has been going, and it's the way that funds have been flowing in my clients' accounts.
Yeah, it's interesting with gold. I love that mental model. Who'd you get that from? That's fantastic.
I can't remember. I don't think it
Yeah.
was me. It could have been me, but I think it was someone smarter.
That's awesome. I think that's probably what we're going to live through as a society. But yeah, like when you're giving up bonds in favor of gold, you're embracing that the inflation resistance of gold matters more than the delta of the nominal yield. You're going to get your 4% yield with your bond, and you're not explicitly going to get any yield with your gold, but ostensibly the value of the gold will grow with the overall economy, so just overall GDP growth, and be offset by the dilution of gold supply every year, which is 1.5 to 2%. So you end up treading water because GDP will grow at 2%, and then you'll be diluted at 2% a year. So you're treading water ultimately with gold. And so your decision to switch from bonds to that is that treading water is better than losing ground if your assumption is the inflation is higher than the 4% nominal yield you're going to get with that bond. And that's the world we're going to be shifting into. So yeah, gold being the new bond makes a ton of sense, and Bitcoin being a better gold makes even more sense.
Amen.
This is why we do these macro shows, guys. I love just letting your minds wander.
Yeah.
Well, it is really interesting to see what's happening. I mean, it's interesting to me to see what's happening with demand for gold and seeing negative. Speaking of ETF flows, right? Gold ETF flows in the U.S. have not been positive. I think they've been negative in recent months. But it seems that there's a lot of Chinese gold demand. It seems like there's a lot of central bank gold demand, Russia, China. That should continue if the world becomes a more dangerous place rather than a safer place, and if there's more fragmentation of the geopolitical order. And I think that's quite likely. I wish I didn't feel that way or think that way, but I do think that international trust has been breaking down and is likely to keep breaking down. Gold has been the money for enemies in the past, and paper, U.S. government paper or other foreign government paper, certainly looks less appealing, especially when there's a possibility that either it could be confiscated or that your principal and interest isn't 100% guaranteed. Of course, it was never 100% guaranteed, but at least if you were a foreign government, foreign central bank, you were pretty highly confident that you were going to get paid. And thanks to the freezing of the Russian central bank assets, that's in a little bit more doubt today. Also doesn't help that the U.S. is running massive deficits as far as the eye can see, with no plans to do otherwise.
Yeah, I got to hand it to Lynn Alden and I guess Luke Groman are probably the two that were nailed this one in advance of how Lynn Alden has had some meme from the Matrix talking about what's really going to cook your noodle is how increasing deficits will drive higher inflation. And it's because the amount of debt and the interest expense causing us to issue more money, which then just goes into the money supply as a stimulative effect, causing a higher inflation. Like, oh shit, that's a bit of a spiral we are stuck in now. And as Lynn Alden puts it, nothing's going to stop this train.
Absolutely nothing. And we live in a world of perpetual inflation, right? Where the money supply is expanded every single second of every single day by virtue of people taking out loans, whether it's, they're buying the house, they're buying the cars, they're buying the washing machines, their sofas, anything they buy on credit, anything they buy on finance, you're green lighting that bank, that federally licensed bank, to counterfeit money into your bank account on which they charge you interest. And this is what I wrote about in my piece, Usury, Your Bank and You. What a clown world. I mean, it is perpetual inflation. And we're trapped into living in this cycle where the people around us who are forced into taking loans because the purchasing power of their dollars and everything that they've worked for, the energy they've expended to get that wage is being inflated away from them. So they have to take on debt, which is counterfeited into the system, which devalues the purchasing power of every single person around them.
Yep.
That's it. And to get ahead, to be a member of, I don't want to say the elite, but let's just say, to build a better life for your family, everyone's sold the, well, in the U.S. at least, many have been sold the idea of going to college and or buying a house as as the wealth driver, the wealth creator. I just finished Peter Turchin's book End Times, which is sort of in the vein of fourth turning, things that have to do with cycles and societal cycles. He uses the term surplus elites, which is basically when society gets into a position where there are too many people competing for the same number of scarce chairs at the top of the hierarchy, and especially when those people are educated, you can get problems. You can get a scenario like what they called the cognoscenti that was in Russia during the Russian Revolution, which is highly generally smart, highly educated people that thought they did the right thing to get ahead in life, and surprise, they're not ending up where they thought they would be. So it's not great for societal stability, and that's one of the things we're facing right now. I think personally that it's one of the drivers of the ongoing protests on college campuses right now, although there's other drivers of that, needless to say. But yeah, I think there's I think the younger generations are finally, hopefully, waking up. I hope that some of them will have enough capital to get a little bit of savings into Bitcoin. And the good news about Jesse, about your call that we probably won't have a Bitcoin rapture is that hopefully there'll be some good stacking days and years ahead of us. We haven't talked about short-term price, and I don't really have a view on short-term price, but now feels like a pretty decent time to be stacking, young or old, but especially if you're young.
Agreed. It's quite possible that right now is the best time that people will ever see again to stack. You know, like, which is to say, this could be near the bottom of a dip that we never return to again. It's quite possible, given the track record of prior post-halving bull markets, where you had like 7 in 2016-17, you had 25% plus drawdowns, and in 2021 you had like 4 or 5, I think. Which is to say, this is the first of probably quite a few during a much larger bull market. And if that's the case, then people 6 months from now may look back enviously at these prices.
And just to so the listeners know, at point of conversation, we're currently at 59,243.
Yep.
But
under 60,000. That's
Yeah.
quite a significant.
But just yesterday it was 57,000. So, you know,
Yep.
right.
Yep.
And we could totally just sag down to 52,000 over the next 3 months. That would also not be surprising for Bitcoin, but it could also, you know, 3 months from now we could be at 80,000, and that would also not be surprising.
Well, tough times for Bitcoin, guys. I mean, we've not talked about this yet, but we've got the two dudes from Samurai picked up.
Yeah.
They've got their collars felt. They've been indicted with, it's weird wording. I was listening to a podcast today, Bitcoin Q&A, and Seth for privacy were on Peter's show. And yeah, so I was up to speed as I can be, I guess, but nowhere near as deep down in the weeds as these guys. But they're being charged with conspiracy for money laundering. I mean, that use of the
Conspiracy
word
to commit money laundering. It's not money laundering. It's conspiracy to commit money laundering.
So
right?
now you're this is like Minority Report shit, guys. This is like, you know, getting ahead of people. Like, you wait, these guys, they might conspire. They might have a meeting, which is all a conspiracy is, a meeting of the minds. We right now are conspiring on this Zoom call. We're, you know, pontificating of where the market might go and whatever else. So they've been picked up for conspiracy. Like, I can't believe the clown world in which we live right now. It's just incredible. And, you know, a disclaimer, who knows what's going to come out in the wash throughout the whole trial, you know, but that wording alone is just really very, very strange and very worrying.
Yeah. It really is quite worrying, because it could be the opening gambit in a larger attack on self-custody. And that would be extremely problematic. It's bad enough if they're just gonna, if their actual beef is with privacy tools, that's bad enough. But if this becomes part of how they have to chip away at privacy before they can then attack self-custody, that would be a real existential threat against Bitcoin. It's a little bit scary right now.
Yeah, I think it's a great episode, by the way. I listened to it too on what Bitcoin did, and I agree. I don't remember who made the point, but I agree with the point, which is privacy is something that just gets continually encroached upon. The government can't help itself. You know, well-meaning individuals in the government can't help themselves. I remember I was at I think two college reunions ago, so it might have been 6 years ago, and I was talking with a classmate. You know, he's a prosecutor now, And his attitude at the time was, yeah, anything that makes privacy better makes my job harder because I'm tasked with catching these criminals. And of course, we Bitcoiners say, well, good old fashioned police work. Nobody said it was easy. That's just your job. It's not your, you can't take that to the logical conclusion, which is we all give up all our freedoms and our human rights, just so they can catch more bad guys with higher probability. But there's no bright line, and since there's no bright line, it's just a constant struggle, and we're gonna have to fight for our rights for the rest of our lives, as far as I can tell.
It sucks that, like, the Boston Tea Party tax was based on a protest against a 2% tax.
I saw that meme today. Did you see that meme on Twitter?
I think I might have seen it through you, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
And then now we've got our 40% annual tax, and nobody makes it.
The meme for the listeners, the meme was the Boston Tea Party, the guns going off, like massive riots over a 2% tax. And fast forward to 2024, everybody's sitting around in like the market square looking at their freaking cell phones, not caring, at 42% tax or whatever it is right now. And it's like, wow. Yeah, we got there pretty quick.
Yeah. Andy talking about how people in power can't help themselves when it comes to privacy, but it's more than privacy. It's power. It's overall encroachment in general.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded of I read somewhere that the average American in the 1800s, their only interaction with the U.S. government outside of wars was the post office. Like, that was the only time you ever interacted with the U.S. government, because there were no taxes. And so there wasn't like a large budget for stuff. And so you just lived your life, and you used the post office occasionally, and that was it. And obviously that's laughable to us now, because the government touches everything in our lives, because they have inserted themselves into everything in our lives and have gradually, slowly taken more power and responsibility and involvement in our lives and education of our children, and involvement in our daily affairs and everything. And so, the government can't help itself with regard to privacy, but it also can't help itself with regard to everything. Though it may care more about privacy than most topics, because it sees it as some sort of threat.
So here's a question about privacy, because I've thought about this, and I've thought about it with respect to how I feel about people who are taking personal risk to build privacy into Bitcoin, and I'm of two minds on it. So I want privacy, first of all, number one, but also number two, I think the bigger and more entrenched Bitcoin gets, maybe the more likely it is the average person, will stand up for that right. Maybe maybe it's the other way around. When I think about keeping America safe for Bitcoin, I think about, yes, I want privacy, but I want 21 million more, and so I'm okay if it's harder to launder money on Bitcoin in these early formative years, as long as we get the tools later. And then I think to myself, well, is it harder to build the tools later? I'm not convinced that it is harder to build the tools later for privacy. I wonder if it would be an easier struggle if that step came later, because you'd have more people who own Bitcoin who also want privacy and are more likely to go to the mat for these individuals who are taking risk to try and build privacy solutions on top of Bitcoin. What do you think? What do you think, Princey? You think just build all the privacy tools now, gain adoption, basically have the fight early rather than have the fight late?
I don't know, man. All I know is, it's a trope, right? It's a meme. Everything's good for Bitcoin. But I once had a lady on my show, Moles, and she was very much talking about like, and I'm way out of my lane here, but like the psychedelic realm, the spiritual realm, and whatever else. And she's like, all this infighting in Bitcoin, it's going to happen, obviously, and we're going to have these big ideas, and people are going to come and they're going to build these tools, and they're going to get taken down. This is going to happen, and that's going to happen. But you just got to remember that everything is always as it should be. And I'm like, whoa, that's pretty based. So, I I'd love to
that
be
may
able
get
to.
all the way into the question of free will. I mean, like, do we have free will? Can humans take action? Do we believe in I guess, do we believe in human action? Do we believe that each of us could make a difference in the outcome of the universe? I don't subscribe to the notion that it's all predestined.
Yeah, it's like I said, man, it was way out there for me. I don't know is the answer to your question, Andy. I don't know. All I do know is always back Bitcoiners. You cannot underestimate the level of ingenuity that the plebs, when backed into a corner, are going to come up with. So I see this as, and not only that, right? Look what's been happening with the inscriptions and the spam and the time stamping and everything else that we in fact, if you go back and listen to our last show, we were just touching on that on our last show, and it's blown up ever since then. It just went completely nuts, and that's backed certain people into a corner to get very vocal and to try and build tools against it. And now we've got Ocean Mining doing their thing, and the fix the filter guys. Would we even be here if we hadn't have had the block size wars?
Right.
Like, what would Bitcoin have looked like if we hadn't have gone through that 2-year period? What would it look like if we didn't have all the shit coins and the ICOs in 2017? I don't know.
Yeah. And I think you can make the argument that I guess I sort of maybe it's comforting to me to think this way, but I think that it was path dependent. Like, you needed to go through that in order to develop the callus in a specific way that Bitcoin now has, to resist change. In particular with the block size wars, that helped train the immune system for Bitcoin of how to reject surreptitious attacks by trying to change the code, change the protocol. And now I think it's pretty well established that hard forks won't be tolerated, and any suggestion of a hard fork will be vetted with extreme prejudice, as it should be. And I think that we needed to go through the block size wars to develop that. And maybe right now with ordinals and with the attack on privacy, maybe this is just the next test of Bitcoin's anti-fragility. And that out of this, maybe you could say that if the samurai guys were, apprehendable, it just means that there's not yet an unstoppable form of privacy tool on Bitcoin, and that that hasn't been cracked yet as an open source development challenge. Granted, I don't know shit about development, let alone open source development, but from a philosophical point of view, maybe that's all it really means.
Everything that can be tried will be tried, and especially things that need to be developed. So yeah, I mean, I feel for those. I feel for those guys. I want privacy. Yeah, I don't want bad things to happen to people that are building privacy into Bitcoin. But yeah, maybe that's the lesson, is that if there's an attack vector, government are going to come at you.
And we can't leave this part of the conversation without saying it's high time they let Ross out. That's complete bullshit. I mean, that story's been done, played. Yeah. So whoever the next president is, can you please pardon Ross?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
He did he didn't deserve what he's got. He's already served. I don't need God. How long has he been in? How long has he served already? How much time?
Like 10
A
years,
decade?
right?
Got to be
A
10
decade?
years.
Because it was
Yeah.
2013. Was it
Yeah.
2013 Silk Road came down?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right, guys. What are we going to talk about now? And how long do you have? Because we've been going an hour and a half. It feels shorter because Lauren hijacked the first 45 minutes. But like,
It's all part of, we know
let's
it's
get.
part of your master plan, Princey. We know this is your this is all part of your Satoshi. I've moved on to other things plan.
Absolutely. In fact, my wife is now part of this European Bitcoin for Women's group that are going to try and start setting up. Great success, by the way, in Bitcoin Atlantis. There was a little side gig there, which Natalie was part of, and Rachel Gay. A big shout out to those two that organized and put on the women's event. Like 100 ladies showed up.
That's cool.
And this is so great for the plebs that now can say, we are going to the conference, not beg for me to go to the conference. And because Sophia, my daughter, she was running the kids block with Frankie Hoddle, who put in a great effort, and they had their own little tent. And their first little panel, they had a 12-year-old guy asking. It was explain Bitcoin to me like I'm a 12-year-old was the title. And the his two guests in the kids tent in the marquee in front of about 30 kids, all sitting on the floor, was Giacomo Zucco and Jack Mallers. And he like, this is what I'm here to see. Like, this is freaking. And 1 hour those guys spent answering their questions, and and then questions started coming from the parents, and noticeably the wives. It wasn't just the dudes in there geeking out, But yeah, so my wife's getting. So I think I can retire soon, guys. Lauren takes the part. My wife and my other daughter, they carry on with the conference appearances. My son runs a little gaming section with his other little friend Sam, Nathan Day's son from BTC Maps. It's all happening here in Europe, guys. You need to come to our side of the pond. That's an open invitation. Who's coming to BTC Prague? Come on.
Oh man, I would love to. I haven't been to Prague since I had one kid. I took, actually funny that you mentioned it. That was first touch for me. I think it was 2013, maybe when it was either, it was, when did Gox go?
2014.
Yeah,
Was it
14, I want to say, yeah.
Okay, so it was pre-Gox, but yeah, Economist article on audio, right? Economist podcast. And I was driving from Prague, I think, to Vienna. And so I had a great time in Prague. Heard an article about Bitcoin.
Andy.
Didn't understand it at all.
Yes.
But it seared in my mind as the first touch that I missed it happened on that trip.
Priestess, are we going to see you in Europe, or are you just going to let Sailor bring your slides across and use them in his shows?
Yeah, that's what he did last year. First kid on the way in just a few weeks, so I don't think I'll be doing much of anything for a while.
Amazing to hear. Another little Bitcoiner coming our way.
That's right.
But I'm still gonna make Jesse show up for our podcast that we've got going.
Yeah, come on, shill it.
Yes.
Here we go. You ready? So first 10 episodes of Scarce Assets Show. Preston Pish, Jeff Booth, Lynn Alden, Pierre and Morgan Richard, Robert Breedlove, Mark Moss, Alex Gladstein, Samson Mao, Dan Tapiero, and number 10 coming out in 2 weeks will be VJ Boyapati.
Boom.
So how we doing?
You guys got the names. You got the pulling power though. I mean, like what a team to be doing a podcast.
It's all Andy. Andy's got this brand that everyone's like, oh yeah, I'll go on Andy's podcast, of course. and I'm just there riding shotgun, and I get to chip in with a few questions too.
somehow to my surprise, possibly also to Jesse's surprise, we've been able to book some awesome guests, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'm finally learning a little bit your craft, Princey, and we've got a ways to go. At least I have a ways to go, catching up. But it helps having good people on. It's much easier. It's much easier running a show when you've got great people who can talk.
Yeah, very easy. So how's Dan Tapiero doing? Is he coming around to Bitcoin only yet, or is he still like investing in
He's
all the
definitely
things?
not. He's definitely not Bitcoin only. That episode was was it this week? I guess it was this week.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think he did say the word Ethereum quite a few times. And you know, it's it is
He's a
what it
mercenary.
is.
He's an opportunist mercenary. And I mean that in a I say that with admiration. He's very open about it, and it's a winning formula of like finding where there's momentum or value to be had and being a part of it. Not my approach, but I do sort of admire the I'm gonna look at all opportunities and see where whatever moves me, I'm gonna be a part of it. Compelling.
The
And
other
what's
thing
going-
too is understand that at least as a macro trader, I mean, he does listen to the market. So if Bitcoin absolutely crushes everything else in its path, I'm talking about other digital assets, other cryptos, he'll be among the first, I guess, to readjust his perspective, right? He pays attention to changes in the world and changes in the environment and changes in markets. So that's another thing to consider.
This is the upside to being just a humble pleb that can, just stack sats, right? You don't have a multi-millionaire, if not billionaire, on the end of the line wanting to know how his portfolio has been performing this week and why you're not investing in this, that, and the other thing. And that's what people like Dan and others in his position are dealing with. And Jesse, you've spoken about this before. Not fun.
And look, he's a major top of funnel. I mean, I'm still grateful. Everyone that we've had on the show, I'm grateful for, because they've some of them are 100% toxic or semi-toxic Bitcoin maximalists, and I think that's great. And we're lucky to have them because they speak so eloquently on the topic, and they're right, basically. At least I think they're right. And then other folks, especially who are TradFi people or have made their fortunes or made their made their businesses, made their way in traditional finance, they're at least giving it the time of day. I think they're giving it. I think they're making it the most important component of their personal portfolios, at least. And you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
What's going on with OnRap? Jenny, Jesse, Jenny.
A lot of great stuff. So for folks who aren't familiar with OnRamp yet, we're multi-institution custody business that offers multi-institution custody, multi-sig for Bitcoin holders. And for folks who are new to Bitcoin, we also have a private placement and Bitcoin trust vehicle. It's like the ETFs, but allows for in-kind redemption, and also utilizes our multi-institution custody, which is better than leaving coins with Coinbase, which is what all the other ETFs do. Those are our two main products, and yeah, things are humming along. We're adding quite a few new clients, especially on the custody side. I think we have realized that there's a real market need among existing Bitcoiners in particular for a way to diversify how they're holding their self-custody stack, because the before multi-institution custody, the best you could do was self-custody, and still self-custody should be a part of how every pleb is holding their stack. But for folks who have been in for quite a while and have maybe $1 million of Bitcoin, maybe more, it starts to be pretty uncomfortable knowing that you have it all in one basket, one self-custody basket, where you could screw something up, you could be vulnerable to a wrench attack, or if you die, your heirs might not know what to do or how to access that Bitcoin. You probably set it up right, but there's that lingering doubt that maybe you didn't. And so we're realizing that there's quite a bit of demand among Bitcoiners like that, to put a portion of their stack in multi-institution custody, where 3 institutions, OnRamp, BitGo, and CoinCover, hold a key each on your behalf, and you, the end client, don't have to hold a key. But because each of those institutions is only holding one key, none of them have unilateral control of your coins. So the end client remains in full control of their coins in a multi-institution custody setup. So it's a bit of a different take on custody. It's not self-custody, but it is, because you maintain control without having to hold keys. And so that's what we've been building and improving on, and improving our UI, UX, and adding to it. We've got a new inheritance flow that makes it really easy to designate who are your beneficiaries in the event that you get hit by a bus. And because of the setup, it makes it very easy for us to seamlessly transition who the account owner is from you to your beneficiaries, and therefore eliminate that risk of something going wrong in the inheritance process, and with your self-custody treasure map that you probably have set up, for all the plebs out there,
Yeah.
who know that experience. So yeah, it's been really invigorating. I think we're going to see that multi-institution custody becomes a fixture in how everybody approaches custody, because I think the end state is that anybody with meaningful on-chain Bitcoin will hold a portion of it in self-custody and then a portion of it in multi-institution custody, and therefore you will have de-risked for all of your major attack vectors or screw up possibilities between yourself and this outsourced multi-institution custody format, where none of the institutions holding a key on your behalf have control of your coins and you retain control. So I think we're moving towards that world, and we're in the very early days of that. But it's been very exciting to work on, and to work with Andy as part of that, building this company and brand. So for anyone out there interested in that product, check us out at onrampbitcoin.com, or shoot me a DM on Twitter, or comment on something, because DMs are kind of tough to wade through all the scams that you get in your inbound DMs.
How's your
Quincy's
cryptos
laughing because he
trading?
knows the pain.
Good morning. How's your trade? Good morning.
Yep.
Yeah, I just to second what Jesse said, it's there's just some percentage of Bitcoiners out there who have most of the stack in their Ninja homebrew self-custody solution, whatever that may be. But yes, they have that small amount of doubt about whether that'll get passed on to their heirs if they get hit by a bus. And so some of the stack probably makes sense to have in a situation where it's going to transfer to them without friction. And then if true, then yeah, how do you want those keys to be held? Do you want them with a single custodian? Probably not. Multi-institution custody seems quite likely to be the long-term future for that part of the, of the asset base.
Yeah. And I'll just also add, if for anybody out there who's listening to this and is interested, mention that you heard about it on the show, and I will make sure to hook you up So putting that out there for folks.
Well, thank you. And I think this one goes out to the humble pleb sitting there listening with his first ever hardware wallet of choice, whether that's like a Trezor or a Nano, Ledger Nano or something like that. It's got like 10 to 15 coins on, and just no, that'll be fine. And I'm sure I've got the words written down somewhere. It's like, yeah, we're looking at you, man. Like,
Yeah.
have a little further think about, what that's truly going to become, and whether you just want to leave that to chance of it being sat in a safety deposit box, in a lawyer's office or something, or wherever it might be. Yeah, just have another rethink, because like we were talking about earlier, people build these products for a reason. And this is why you guys, Jesse and your co-founder, and this is why Andy was attracted to the product as well. It's great to know that the people of your professionalism and integrity have picked up on this particular niche of the market that needs addressing.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Appreciate
it's
that.
been very
Quincy.
exciting, energizing. I truly think I think this will become the standard for how people hold Bitcoin. I think, like the ETFs will eventually, I think, shift to like a multi-institution custody format, because it's simply better than leaving all the coins with Coinbase and trusting that that's going to be fine. And so I think these large pools of capital will eventually, after it's been battle tested or proven out, shift to this sort of format because of all the benefits of it. And so it's exciting to be a part of building out that standard now. And there's a lot of positive momentum and tailwinds. It's been fun.
Well, you guys are going to be having Christmas dinner with Larry before you know it, right? So,
Just to restate the obvious, by the way, always be, to all the plebs also, always be upping your game. Always be upping your self custody game. Get better and better. Gain that confidence for a bigger and bigger portion of your stack. Prove us wrong, at least with respect to your stack, but also think about your kids.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, always up the game. I mean, I'm constantly doing. I always feel as though I'm so far behind. I really do. But there are plebs out there that aren't running a node yet. So looking at you guys, get that node spun up, get that running, make some transactions, get more and more comfortable making transactions. Use Lightning wallets connected to your node, and spend some Bitcoin, especially at meetups. Especially because the people that are hosting those meetups, they work very closely with the bar, cafe, or restaurant to be able to accept Bitcoin. And then plebs go along and pay with card. It's like, stop. Like, you've got to go and pay with Bitcoin, because there's so much, groundwork going on there. But yeah, it's just, we're all on our own journey. And as long as we're all improving very incrementally each step, yeah, we're all just going to get stronger and more connected. So, boys, it's final question time. I forget how many times you've answered it.
The orange pill question.
I forget how many times you've forgotten that I ask it, because every time it seems to be a surprise to you. But if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
All right. So the house next to me was recently sold. My former neighbor, both of them rest their souls, husband and wife. Husband passed away a few years ago. Wife passed away recently. He had built the house with his own two hands. Anyway, it was bought by an investor who I think is going to use it as a store of wealth. And I doubt that they have any Bitcoin, although I haven't had the conversation yet. So I intend to have that conversation with the new owner, and I am gonna give them an orange pill if I have one left to give, because they ought to be buying Bitcoin rather than real estate investment properties.
Love it.
That's the grassroots approach. I like it. I recently have been blown away by the power of the Taylor Swift fandom. And so I think that I didn't realize how influential she is in the lives of
there's going to
tens
be
of millions.
there's going to be philosophical university courses now studying the lyrics of her songs. Like,
Yeah.
you can't write this clown world stuff up. It's
Yep.
just amazing. But anyway, go ahead.
Well,
are you becoming a Swiftie, Croesus? Is this what are you coming out at the same time as?
My wife is quite a fan, and so I have had to listen to quite a bit of it. And there's some serious poetry in there, in places. But I'll never be a Swiftie. But I do appreciate now like if Taylor Swift was to say all my fans should get a little Bitcoin and take self-custody, I think maybe 100 million women all over the world would do so, and that would be quite something.
Love it. I hope you're listening, Taylor, as usual. And please, stop approaching me in the DMs. It's getting
also
embarrassing.
with those tickets at like $1,000 a pop or whatever, she could stack a lot of sats if she started accepting Bitcoin.
Absolutely, yeah.
And she could disintermediate. She could disintermediate. The gatekeepers. That's actually one.
Master.
Yeah, well, that's one thing she's known for, right? Is I can't remember which. I don't know if it was the record labels or who it was. Did she buy back some of her catalog? Anyway, she's known for rightly wanting to have as much control of her own catalog and her own earnings as possible. And yeah, so if you're listening, Taylor, this is a way you can take back control.
Yeah, that'll be the day.
Come on, Taylor. Get Lightning verified on Fountain app and just drop your newest singles on there. You have those sats flowing.
She's too busy becoming a billionaire, I think.
She's definitely there already, for sure.
Thank you, as always, for coming on and chewing the fat. Always fun. And we say this every time. We should do it monthly. There's no way we all get too busy. So quarterly, I'm going to promise quarterly.
All right.
And goodness knows what will happen between now and the next one. Always a moving space. So have fun. Until next time, thank you both for coming on, and thank you for what you do for Bitcoin.
Likewise, Princey. Thanks for having us.
See you guys.